Welcome to Section 2 of Advanced UX Techniques. In Section 2, Sketch Wireframing Symbols and Prototyping, User Interface and Sketch Symbols, why UX and UI build scalable systems. We're going to be continuing to explore how to use our software more efficiently in building user interfaces. Now, user interfaces starts from simple ideas, right? Sketches on the wall, outputs, and we're going to talk about how we take those things and put them into software really efficiently. We're going to talk about sizes and some UI grids. We'll review some more things about using repeatable systems of symbols inside of Sketch, and then we'll practice some of that as we keep moving to keep us efficient. So let's get started. As you have explored in some of our other videos, things that you've been starting to understand is that user interfaces require a lot of attention, and we need to consider a lot of what we need to do, because to make a great interface doesn't just happen out of nowhere, right? We have to spend a lot of time engaging in them. And ideas are hard sometimes to find, but if we build them and we create things over and over again, we can then learn what works the best and we can put them in places. User interfaces are everywhere, right? You're using a user interface to engage in this video. You probably have a smartphone. They are increasingly at places like gas stations and everywhere else that in the world that has an interface. And because of that, we need to be designing a lot of these pieces. Now, there's many free tools out in the world that help us get from point A to point B faster. And there's no harm in using some of these tools, but you just want to make sure that you're customizing them for your clients and your particular outputs. And you want to learn to be efficient with the tools, right? Because everywhere when we build an interface, we should try and make it understood, usable, useful. If we can make it delightful and even shareable, that's even better. If you're using Sketch, I highly recommend going to get a set of plugins called Craft by InVision. Now, we've been using InVision for other tools, but I highly recommend downloading some of these supercharged tools that lets you do things with like stock photography and data and duplicate. It really is about efficiency using Sketch. And it connects nicely within InVision, which we have used in the past and shown how to kind of build quick prototypes. So the faster you can get an idea in a prototype stage, the better off you are. Supercharging your ability to kind of deal with screens is really important, because UI kits or outputs that are built in with Sketch are about maintaining lots and lots of pieces, and we need to be efficient at that. Part of a way in which we're efficient with our screens is we set the rules. We establish grids, we build on those grids, and then we communicate those grids not only to our development partners and or if we're developing it ourselves, but we make sure that we know how these things work, because we're the experts in the room when it comes to how the screens are supposed to be designed, and we need to spend a lot of time paying attention to that. So let's open up the Sketch file that we had created in the first section of this video. Now, if you can remember, we had started to build a set of tools, right? And we created this symbol for the button called button second. And what's nice is I can go in here and I can actually override this in my overrides, and I can call it. What I challenge you to do is to rebuild these screens. And I'm hoping that you've gotten to some place, at least a starting place. If you haven't, we can do this pretty quickly. Some ways we can do this nicely is I can say, okay, this is apples, and now that's going to change the override to apples. Now, part of these tools that makes our life really easy is we can also say, okay, I know I need 7 of these buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these buttons, right? I can also use tools that we just downloaded from Craft. If you haven't installed those yet, I highly recommend it. Look, I even need to update my Craft tools. So it will do that quickly. And what I can do is I can create a vertical set of tools. And I can say, you know what, I need 6 of these items, and they all need to be 5 pixels apart. And I can duplicate this quickly. See how that works? Now I have 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's awesome about this is that this creates a group of buttons that you can drag, you can kind of make bigger if you need, you can engage with them. This is a group that's already kind of put together through the duplicate tool. And I can come in here and I can relabel each of these buttons. So they're not all apples. It'll say apples and lemons and mangoes and pears and kumquats and watermelon, right? So the second one is lemons. Third one is mangoes, etc. Now again, you guys don't need to watch me. And the last is a watermelon. Now, part of designing this, we really started to think about the screen, but one way which I think is really important when building any screen is that you always are thinking through the grids. So one way to do that in InVision is you can actually show the layout in your grid. And I've gone ahead and built out a 12-column grid inside of my iPhone screen. So I know that my screen is 375 pixels by 812. And I can also, if I needed to, I could go into the grid settings and I could change a grid that's there, or I could also go into the layout settings and I can define how many columns, offset my pages from, I always center my grids, and then I can say, you know what, I need a gutter pixel that's maybe 10 pixels wide rather than 26. And I can change my view of that. Now, you can change this color to anything you want. I usually make them obnoxious colors, whether they're pink or green or something like you would never really use in your design language. And that help you overlay it on the top of stuff to make sure that you're aligning items to grids. So I can see that like some of my items aren't aligning to grids. So I could select this group and I could stretch it out so that it takes up the gutter of these columns. Now, building out multiple pages is really useful because I can do these things pretty quickly. And I can grab another screen and I can say, you know what, I want to copy all this stuff because I have 3 screens that I need. It maintains the same grid system and it will quickly copy your items as you need. Right? We need 3 screens because we're trying to mirror what was in our sketch that was done before. And then we can kind of continue to build on these tools. Now, if you don't want this stuff on and off all the time, you can turn them off on individual screens, or you can select multiple screens and then say, I don't want to see this, etc. Now, anytime you copy a screen, like right now, like the screen is labeled iPhone X, because that was what the artboard was labeled as. But for InVision's sake and for your organization, you should really organize these in your own way. So by double selecting on the screen title, you can label them. I usually put a number like 01, and this is the home page. This becomes really important as you're organizing, and you can have hundreds of screens sometimes. So labeling them with a number and then something very descriptive like home, shuffle, home page. Actually, let's call it list page. And reorder 01. And then this is 03 list page reordered. Now, labeling your pages should be very descriptive. Your items should also be there, and you should always be designing on a grid. Now, these screens are pretty quick and we can kind of organize them. All of these are symbols that we've created in the past. So if I wanted to change one of these symbols, I could double select into a symbol and it'll take me to the symbol page, right? Now let's say I wanted all of my symbols to have a rounded edge. I just want them to be slightly rounded, let's say 6 pixels, 5 pixels. And I want them to all be a much lighter gray. Now, when I return to my instance, you can see that every button has been modified because they're all the same symbol. So this is where being efficient with your software is really, really useful. Now, practicing symbols, building your pages out, using grids and content is really important in designing any screens. When using Sketch in particular, our grids are really key to keeping consistent, designing on an output, and then working with symbols to the output. Now, symbols are really key also because any item that repeats more than once on any screen should be made into a symbol. That's the rule of thumb. So continue to improve your screens. If you haven't finished up the 3 screens that are there and all the UI elements, make sure to go add them. I will be continuing to do that as well and showing you some tips and tricks along the way. So join me in the next video because we're going to continue to improve our Sketch skills and be better at this. If you're still struggling with some software outputs and you're doing some things that you didn't know, I highly recommend joining dailyui.co. They'll send you a challenge every day to build and get better at making things with software. Now, this doesn't have to be through Sketch, but if you're using Sketch, you could practice that every day and then you get better at it and you get more efficient.